Ford has huge problems. Yes, potentially very huge problems. We'll talk about the first problem and then a few others in just a moment. But the current problem they've got on their hands is, well, the government is forcing not just Ford, but everyone to go almost pretty much all in on electric vehicles because, well, there's essentially, they don't want to call it fines, but it's essentially fines if you don't have a high enough fleet average. So your fuel economy needs to be overall across your entire fleet, all the vehicles that you sell. You need to have an incredibly high mile per gallon rating. So slowly we're moving towards 50 miles per gallon, which for the last decade has made individual manufacturers solidly believe that they're going to need to sell a lot of electric vehicles, because you can't just have a very low, let's say you have 10 models, you can have 5 of those models at the manufacturer being low volume, and then incredible on all electric, let's say, and then the other 5 vehicles being gas guzzlers. No, because they look at the overall average. So if you have one model, let's say an F-150 at whatever it may be, let's say somewhere around 25 miles per gallon, or maybe one day 30 some miles per gallon, well, that's still far off from the 50 miles per gallon. So if you're selling 800,000 of those F-150s, you need to bring down that average. So if you sell 800,000 Lightnings, for example, well, if you've got one that counts as, let's say, the equivalent of 100 miles per gallon, and then the other at 30 miles per gallon, well, then you pass the test. You avoid fines or having to pay Tesla. It, for some reason, has to be carbon credits that you buy from not someone outside your industry, but inside your industry. So you're strengthening your competition. And this is a big blow right now, because guess what? Huge problem for Ford. Problem one, Ford buys a lot of their batteries from a Chinese manufacturer of batteries. So CATL, C-A-T-L. So GOP lawmakers want Ford Mustang Mach-E supplier banned. And this isn't just bad for Ford. This is just bad. I've been oddly saying this for quite some time. When it comes to batteries, I've had an electric vehicle. I love electric vehicles. I don't want our choices to be reduced to only electric vehicles. And I think that we have a huge threat from China, because they can produce electric vehicles for very, very cheap. They can also produce batteries, and they produce most of the world's batteries for very cheap. And I've said this for a very long time. I've always, not even under my breath, but I've kind of slid it quickly and changed the subject before my channel gets canceled. But I've talked about horrendous, I've talked about the humanitarian impact, horrendous conditions. I've even at times called it slavery. And guess what? Thank you very much to Edward Snitkoff for bringing this story to us. But GOP lawmakers are now calling it exactly that. They're saying that CATL, one of the largest battery manufacturers in the world, essentially is using slavery to create those batteries. So I've talked about how China makes things for extremely low cost. I've talked about the humanitarian impact. I've also talked about where the batteries get mined. A lot of the batteries get made in China mostly. The minerals come from Africa. I've talked about what is essentially modern day slavery in Africa. But now they're talking about essentially slavery in the terms of the GOP lawmakers. They want these batteries banned, so Ford wouldn't be able to use CATL batteries because of essentially slavery. There's a concern in regards to slavery in China. Of course, China answered saying of course that can we really expect and I'm not any government, can you really expect them to tell the whole truth? Nothing but the truth? No, don't trust what the governments are going to say. We need to really look into this greatly. Ridgeview, congratulations. Thank you for being a member now for 2 years. Wow, congratulations. That's fantastic. And the small business here and the family really appreciates it. We look forward to having dinner with you in either New Hampshire or Vermont coming up, and with Tim Bartz coming up real soon, and all our wives. So really looking forward to that. But you've got the story from originally the Wall Street Journal talking about cattle and the company Gotion, another Chinese battery manufacturer, that the GOP lawmakers want them banned. They don't want their products in the United States at all. And this is actually very serious for Ford. Could it mean the end of Ford? No. Even with the government's forcing Ford to essentially produce and sell electric vehicles, even though Ford loses, on average about $32,000 per electric vehicle sold. And that's an actual loss. And they can absorb that loss because of the profits. So let's say they lose roughly $5 billion per year on the electric vehicles, the Lightning and the Mach-E. Well, if they've made 1 year they made $11 billion on the gasoline powered side of things, that number is going to slowly go down, I suspect, to maybe 8 or 9 billion. But if you make, let's say, 8 billion on one side of the business, the gas powered vehicles, and you lose $4 billion with electric vehicles, you still profit $4 billion. Now the issue though, and it's been a hot topic, the issue though, and this is where it's not just a huge problem for Ford, this is a huge problem for the entire industry. You need to sell gas vehicles. If you're losing money on the EVs, what do you need to do? Sell high volume gas vehicles at a big profit. I don't think it's a coincidence, folks. Don't call this a conspiracy theory. I don't think it's a coincidence that gas vehicle prices have skyrocketed since these, what they don't want to call fines, but really are fines or a form of added taxation, because taxing us on our income isn't enough. Then you need to tax the fuel, and then you need to tax, in a way, the gasoline powered vehicles, not just when you purchase them, but a hidden tax essentially that raises the price of those vehicles because of the loss that exists on electric vehicles. This is a crap show, folks. This is a total crap show, and I think it's a bit of a oversight, or on this topic, complete failure by governments. You're forcing an industry to change, and you're quite possibly either going to kill or very nearly kill that industry. And like I've said for the last, if you've been following me here now for, I think, 2, 3, 4 years, at the very beginning, I believe 4 years ago, I do recall talking about some of the downsides of these electric vehicles and the impact on the automotive industry, the threats to the automotive industry. And from day one, I've talked about the horrendous conditions for mining. And that's not just on the humanitarian level, also on the environmental level. Talked about the potentially very dangerous issues when it comes to the end life cycle of batteries, not just at Ford, but for everyone. And it's a huge concern. If we don't recycle and reuse these batteries properly, we could be destroying the planet. And it won't be, let's say, a nuclear war. If a nuclear bomb goes off, it's pretty obvious, it's in your face. And the planet would be destroyed if we have a third world war and it's a nuclear war, we're going to destroy the planet. So let's pray and hope people can find ways to listen to each other, learn from one another, and let's certainly hope there's no third world war. But what could be almost as disastrous to the planet is if we take billions of batteries and we don't dispose of them properly. That will destroy the planet far worse than the plastic pollution that is going on. So I think it's wild that we're focusing on carbon extinction, where we have, while we have so many other things that could lead us to extinction. There's already an incredible technology for dealing with carbon. Incredible technology. I'm going to share this with you. Top secret stuff that they don't want you knowing about. But the incredible technology for dealing with carbon, folks, that, our gas-powered vehicles, they make carbon, and you know what? It won't lead to extinction if we have this thing called trees. So it's they're magic machines that suck carbon out of the air. They cost absolutely nothing to run, and they build themselves. And it, again, it's called a tree. So a no-duh solution, but somehow globalists seem to think, one in particular seems to think that there's too many trees and we need to get rid of trees to deal with the carbon problem. So I think some people are born into this world to create problems, and then they find solutions that aren't, ideal to the problems that they created. So wild. Yes, Rio 52, really good point. This is a bit of, well, it's not China bashing in the sense that I'm saying that Chinese-made vehicles themselves are bad. I remember 1980s bashing of Japanese vehicles, and earlier from, older people than I, that had talked about how people would talk down and talk about how bad Japanese vehicles are back in the, 60s and 70s. But I'm not saying that the Chinese-made vehicles are poor or that they're horrible or unreliable. I'm just coming from a viewpoint of thinking that I'd rather vehicles be built here under, proper laws in regards to, proper humanitarian laws, and pretty decent, if a vehicle's made in Canada or the US, it's made, the pollution that's created is far less harmful. We're much more responsible with all the production process that goes behind the production of a vehicle than China. And Ford, will they be ruined if their batteries get banned? No. The production is just going to come to, well, probably Canada. There's a lot going down when it comes to not just mines, but also assembly, battery assembly or battery creation factories in Quebec. So a lot of lithium exploration. So there'll be a lot of lithium mining and a lot of lithium battery production in Quebec. Just a question of a little catch up. So it needs a bit of catch up, not catch up. I hope I said catch up and not catch up. But let's move on to the next episode, because that really does cover the topic, I think, and then some. I don't want to upset people. It's a hot topic. But just a little reminder here, I thought this was a neat little image about water levels rising, because of course, somehow Florida is going to get, put underwater from all this global warming. But you've got this beautiful island here in the 1880s, 1910s, and then somehow, I don't understand, but in 2020, what used to be covered underwater, there's now, a nice little coastal little town or